Look, all I'm saying is that compared to a Xixian battlecruiser, your little tin can is basically a kiddie pool floaty at a shark convention. Ambassador Krell gestured dramatically, sloshing his drink precariously close to the edge of his cup. Uh-huh. Commander Eliza Harper didn't even look up from her datapad. After 6 months as humanity's liaison to the Galactic Confederation, she'd grown immune to the constant barrage of what she'd mentally labeled as alien mansplaining. And yet somehow our kiddie pool floaty managed to blast 3 of those Xixian cruisers into space dust last month. The lounge of Diplomatic Station Gamma 7 hummed with the usual evening crowd, a motley collection of species from across known space, all united in their quest to drink, gossip, and occasionally engage in what passed for diplomacy in this corner of the galaxy. The massive observation dome overhead displayed a breathtaking view of the spiral arm, stars twinkling against the void like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Krell's antennae twitched in what Eliza had come to recognize as the Vreelan equivalent of an eye roll. Pure luck. Statistical anomaly. The Xixians were clearly operating at reduced capacity. Sure they were. Eliza finally looked up, her expression deadpan. Just like they were just testing their weapons systems when they blew up that refugee transport. A tragic misunderstanding, Krell insisted, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. The Confederation Safety Council issued a formal censure. Oh wow, a formal censure. I bet that really taught them a lesson while they were busy annexing 3 more systems. Eliza's voice dripped with sarcasm so thick you could spread it on toast. The Xixians are an ancient and respected member species of the Confederation, Krell replied with the weary tone of someone repeating a line from an official handbook. Their cultural practices may seem aggressive by human standards, but their cultural practices involve claiming any habitable world they fancy, and either enslaving or exterminating the natives, Eliza cut in. Call me crazy, but we humans tend to frown on genocide as a hobby. An uncomfortable silence fell between them, punctuated only by the ambient hum of the station and the distant chatter of other diplomats. Krell fidgeted with his ceremonial sash, clearly uncomfortable with the human's directness. Another trait that had earned Earth's representatives a reputation for being diplomatically challenged. You humans are so binary in your thinking, Krell finally said. The galactic political ecosystem requires nuance, patience, careful deliberation, while people die. And respect for established protocols, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. The Confederation has maintained relative peace for over 15,000 cycles. Relative peace, Eliza echoed. Meaning the powerful do whatever they want, and everyone else just has to take it. Krell's color shifted slightly toward orange, a sign of irritation. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Perhaps a bit more humility would be appropriate when discussing matters you can't possibly fully comprehend. Eliza's retort was interrupted by the urgent beeping of her comm unit. She glanced down at the message and her expression immediately hardened. Duty calls? Krell asked, clearly relieved at the potential end to their conversation. Something like that. Eliza stood and gathered her things. The Xixians just crossed the neutral zone near Proxima Centauri. Apparently they've decided Earth-controlled space looks ripe for some of those cultural practices we were just discussing. Krell's coloration paled dramatically. Surely they wouldn't. The Confederation explicitly warned against... Yeah, well... Eliza smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe they need more than a strongly worded letter this time. As she walked away, Krell called after her. The Confederation protocols are clear, Commander. Any military response must be proportional and authorized by the Safety Council. Eliza turned, walking backward for a few steps. You know what they say on Earth, Krell. Fuck around and find out. The Vreelan ambassador stared after her, his translator struggling with the idiom but the sentiment coming through with crystal clarity. Grand Admiral Zex Kalter of the Xixian Expansionary Fleet stood on the command deck of the Inevitable Dominion, a dreadnought so massive it generated its own weather patterns in some of the larger interior chambers. Around him, officers worked in perfect synchronization, their movements precise and economical, exactly as befitted the military arm of the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Status report, he ordered, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the metal deck beneath their feet. Perimeter established, Admiral, replied his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Velthrak. The human defense fleet has been detected mobilizing from their Mars outpost, but they remain significantly outgunned. We outnumber them 6-1. Excellent. Zex Kalter's mouth parts clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. And the Confederation observers? Maintaining position at the agreed monitoring coordinates. You have exactly 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures before we escalate this response. Zex Kaltar drew himself up to his full impressive height. This is Grand Admiral Zex Kaltar of the Xixian Empire. Your pathetic resistance is noted but futile. The Empire has claimed this sector for development. Surrender now, and your people may apply for protected status under our benevolent rule. To his surprise, the human smiled. Not the fearful grimace he expected, but a predatory baring of teeth that sent an ancestral shiver down his carapace. I was hoping you'd say that, she replied. Time's up. The connection cut, and instantly the ship rocked with multiple new impacts. Status, the Admiral demanded. They've deployed some kind of swarm technology, Velthrak reported, voice rising in panic. Thousands of micro-drones too small for our point defense to target effectively. Activate the secondary shield grid. Deploy countermeasures. Sir, the weapons officer interrupted. 3 of our support cruisers have gone dark. The Unyielding Glory reports critical reactor damage. Another violent shudder ran through the ship, and overhead conduits began to rupture, spewing coolant and sparks across the command deck. This is impossible, Zex Kaltar repeated, but with less conviction. We are the Xixian Empire. We do not lose battles to lesser species. Sir! The sensor operator's voice was shrill with panic. The humans are deploying some new weapon from their lunar base. Energy readings are off the charts. The main screen showed a massive installation on the lunar surface, previously hidden, now glowing with building energy. Evasive maneuvers, the Admiral commanded. All ships, prepare for... His order was cut short as a blinding beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the moon, striking the inevitable Dominion dead center. The command deck erupted in chaos as systems overloaded and failed catastrophically. The last thing Admiral Zex Kaltar saw before emergency protocols plunged the bridge into darkness was the human fleet, now joined by reinforcements that seemed to have appeared from nowhere, systematically dismantling his once proud armada. The Xixian Empire had miscalculated badly. You did what? Ambassador Krell's voice reached a pitch Eliza hadn't previously thought possible for Vreeland vocal apparatus, nearly causing the glasses on the conference table to vibrate. We defended ourselves, she replied calmly, sliding a data chip across the polished surface. All the details are in our official report to the Confederation Safety Council. The emergency session of the Diplomatic Corps aboard Station Gamma 7 had been hastily convened after news of the battle reached them. Representatives from 26 species were present, either in person or via holographic projection, all watching the human-Vreeland exchange with various degrees of shock, horror, or in a few cases poorly concealed amusement. Defended yourselves? Krell sputtered, his skin cycling through colors so rapidly he resembled a malfunctioning light display. You obliterated 60% of their fleet and captured their flagship, including Grand Admiral Zex Kaltar himself. Yes, Eliza agreed pleasantly. We did. They invaded our sovereign territory and fired the first shot. According to Confederation law, that constitutes a clear act of unprovoked aggression, permitting a defensive response. A proportional defensive response, Krell insisted. Not whatever this was. I'm sorry. I must have missed the part of the Confederation Charter that specifies exactly how many ships we're allowed to destroy when someone tries to invade our homeworld, Eliza said, examining her nails with exaggerated casualness. Perhaps you could point it out for me? The Miltari representative, a gelatinous entity contained within an environmental suit, burbled what their translator rendered as a chuckle. She has you there, Ambassador Krell. This is not a laughing matter, Krell insisted. The power balance of the entire sector has been disrupted. The Xixians are demanding reparations and the immediate return of their personnel and vessels. Eliza's eyebrows shot up. Reparations? They attacked us. If anyone's paying reparations, it should be them. That is not how galactic diplomacy works, Commander, Krell said with forced patience. The Xixians are a founding member of the Confederation. Their cultural significance and historical contributions. Don't give them the right to commit genocide, Eliza finished firmly. Look, I understand this is uncomfortable for you. It's much easier to lecture the smaller species about patience and diplomatic channels while the Xixians do whatever they want. But those days are over. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. The Duranti ambassador, a tall avian being, leaned forward. What exactly are you implying, Commander Harper? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating plainly that humanity will not sit quietly while predatory empires carve up the galaxy. We tried playing by your rules. We filed the complaints, attended the hearings, submitted the evidence of Xixian atrocities. And what happened? Nothing. Worse than nothing, they were emboldened to attack us directly. And now we're facing the prospect of open warfare, Krell exclaimed. The Xixian Empire has already issued mobilization orders for their reserve fleets. Eliza smiled thinly. Good. Let them come. The room erupted in shocked exclamations, translation devices struggling to keep up with the cacophony of distressed alien languages. You can't possibly hope to defeat the entire Xixian Empire. The Jaresian delegate clicked through mandibles. They control hundreds of systems. Their military might is unparalleled. Was unparalleled, Eliza corrected, until they met us. And here's something you should all understand very clearly. What you saw yesterday wasn't our full capability. Not even close. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Confederation cannot sanction this conflict, Krell said finally, his voice subdued. If you pursue this course of action, humanity will stand alone. Eliza looked around the room, making deliberate eye contact with each representative in turn. We've stood alone before, but I don't think we will this time. She nodded towards several of the smaller species representatives. How many of you have lost territory to Xixian cultural integration over the centuries? How many have watched colonies disappear, only to be told by this council that your concerns would be taken under advisement? No one answered aloud, but the expressions, or what passed for expressions among the various alien physiologies, told her everything she needed to know. Humanity doesn't want war, she continued, her voice softening slightly. But we won't accept tyranny either. Not against us and not against anyone else who asks for our help. And that's supposed to make us feel better? Krell asked incredulously. That you'll fight everyone's battles for them? Not for them, Eliza corrected. With them, there's a difference. As the session dissolved into heated debate, Eliza slipped out quietly, tapping her comm unit. Harper to Admiral Wells. How did they take it? Exactly as expected, came the reply. Lots of squawking and fluttering. Any sign of real alliance potential? Eliza glanced back at the chamber doors. I'd say at least 8 species are seriously considering it. The ones who've suffered the most under Xixian protection. Good. That's better than our models predicted. There was a pause before the Admiral continued. The Xixian prisoners are being processed now. You should know. The intel we're getting confirms our worst suspicions. This wasn't just about our territory. Let me guess, Eliza said grimly. Earth was going to be an example. To discourage other upstarts. Precisely. Complete orbital bombardment, followed by targeted strikes against major population centers. They were planning to reduce our population by at least 70% before establishing control. Eliza's hand tightened on the comm unit. Send me everything. I want it ready for the next session. Already done. Harper, be careful. We need allies, but we don't need to become what we're fighting against. Understood, Admiral. Harper out. As she made her way through the station's curved corridors, Eliza found herself thinking about Earth history. How often the worst atrocities had been enabled not by the evil of the perpetrators, but by the inaction of bystanders. The Galactic Confederation had become a masterclass in bureaucratic paralysis, forever drafting strongly worded objections while worlds burned. That ended now, one way or another. In the dimly lit brig of the Earth Defense Force flagship Indomitable, Grand Admiral Zex Kaltar sat rigidly on a bench clearly not designed for Xixian physiology. Despite the humiliation of captivity, he maintained his aristocratic bearing, all 6 limbs held in formal posture, head plates expanded to their full intimidating width. The force field separating him from the rest of the ship hummed softly, its blue glow casting alien shadows across his chitinous features. He had refused food, water, and medical attention, a traditional gesture of defiance among captured Xixian warriors. The sound of approaching footsteps broke his meditative stillness. A moment later, a human appeared. Not the military personnel he had grown accustomed to seeing, but a civilian woman in diplomatic attire. Grand Admiral, Eliza Harper greeted him with a formal nod. I'm Commander Harper, Earth's diplomatic liaison to the Confederation. I do not recognize your authority to hold me. Zex Kaltar replied immediately. Under Confederation law, I demand treatment according to my rank and immediate communication with the Xixian embassy. Interesting, Eliza said, pulling up a chair. When you were planning to bombard Earth into submission, you didn't seem overly concerned with Confederation law. But now that you're behind a force field, suddenly you're a big fan of diplomatic protocols. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in irritation. The Xixian Empire does not explain its strategic decisions to lesser species. And yet here you are, captured by one of those lesser species. Awkward. Zex Kaltar's head plates fluttered in what humans had learned to recognize as contemptuous dismissal. A temporary setback. The Empire's response will be swift and absolute. Yes, we've intercepted those communications, Eliza said casually. 12 battle groups mobilizing from your core systems. Impressive. Of course, they'll have to pass through the Canucks Nebula to reach Earth space quickly, and we've already seeded that with quantum mines. Or they could take the long route around the Hephaestus sector, but that would add weeks to their journey, giving us plenty of time to fortify. The Admiral's posture stiffened imperceptibly. The humans shouldn't have known those details, that Xixian military operational plans were encrypted with their most advanced algorithms. You're bluffing, he said, but with less certainty than before. Eliza smiled and activated a small holographic projector. Above her palm materialized a detailed tactical map showing Xixian fleet movements, complete with identification codes, commander names, and weapons loadouts. Thanks for keeping such detailed records on the inevitable Dominion, she said cheerfully. Your encryption was impressive, but it turns out there are advantages to being underestimated. While you were busy dismissing us as primitive, we were busy learning everything about your systems. For perhaps the first time in his long military career, Grand Admiral Zex Kalter was speechless. But I didn't come here to trade barbs, Eliza continued, deactivating the projector. I came with an offer. Humans have nothing I want, the Admiral replied automatically. How about your life, and the lives of the 30,000 Xixian crew members currently in our custody, or the future of your empire? She leaned forward, because right now all of those things are very much in question. You wouldn't dare execute prisoners of war. The Confederation would issue a formal censure? Eliza interrupted, echoing Krell's earlier words with deliberate mockery. Start an investigation committee? Draft a strongly worded letter? Somehow I think we'll survive their disapproval. The Admiral's compound eyes focused on her with new intensity. What do you want, human? Peace. But not the kind of peace your empire has been imposing across the galaxy. Real peace. The kind where smaller species don't live in constant fear of being the next target of Xixian cultural integration. You speak of things you don't understand, Zex Kalter said dismissively. The Empire brings order and advancement to primitive worlds. After killing most of the population and enslaving the rest, sure. Eliza's voice hardened. We've seen the records, Admiral. The processing camps on Teleris Prime. The mass graves on Duranti colonies. The forced sterilization programs on Miltari worlds. It's all very detailed in your own military archives. The Admiral's silence was damning. Here's what's going to happen, Eliza continued. You're going to send a message to your leaders. In it, you'll explain that the Xixian Empire is now facing an adversary unlike any you've encountered before. You'll tell them that we've broken your encryption, that we can detect your ships regardless of stealth technology, and that we have weapons capable of destroying your greatest dreadnoughts. And why would I do that? Zex Kalter asked softly. Because it's all true. And because if you don't, if your empire continues on its current course, we won't stop with defensive actions. Humanity will commit fully to this conflict, and we will take the fight directly to your core worlds. The Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation or possibly amusement. Eliza couldn't be sure. You speak boldly for a species that controls barely a dozen systems. Quality over quantity, Admiral. You saw what a handful of our ships did to your fleet. A surprise tactical advantage. It won't work twice. Care to bet your homeworld on that? Eliza stood up. You have 12 hours to consider my offer. After that, we release everything we've found in your databases to the Confederation Assembly. All the atrocities, all the secret directives, all the evidence of how the mighty Xixian Empire has been systematically violating the very laws it helped create. As she turned to leave, the Admiral spoke again. Even if what you say is true, even if you could stand against us militarily, you are still just one species. The Empire has endured for millennia. We have weathered rebellions before. Eliza paused at the door. You're right about one thing. We are just one species, but we're not standing alone anymore. With that, she left the confused Admiral to contemplate a future suddenly far less certain than it had been days before. The Grand Council Chamber of the Galactic Confederation was an architectural marvel, a vast hemispherical space with seating for representatives of all 147 member species, arranged in concentric tiers according to their length of membership. At the very bottom tier sat the newest additions, including the relatively simple human delegation area. The chamber was designed to inspire awe, with its 100-meter-high ceiling of transparent crystalline material showing the stars beyond, and walls inlaid with the most precious materials from across the galaxy. Ancient ceremonial artifacts from founding member worlds were displayed in environmentally controlled niches, silent testimonies to the Confederation's long history. Today, that august chamber was in absolute chaos. Order! I will have order! The presiding speaker, a wizened Jurisian whose natural clicking speech was amplified to thunderous proportions by the chamber's acoustic design, struggled to regain control of the assembly. On the main presentation floor, Commander Eliza Harper stood calmly beside a holographic display of monumental proportions, a three-dimensional representation of atrocities committed by the Xixian Empire over centuries, complete with location data, casualty figures, and most damningly, excerpts from the Empire's own military directives authorizing these actions. These records were retrieved directly from the command systems of the dreadnought Inevitable Dominion, she explained once the noise had subsided enough for her to be heard. They are authenticated and unaltered. They prove beyond any doubt that the Xixian Empire has been systematically violating the Confederation Charter's most fundamental principles, while this body looked the other way. This is an outrage! The Xixian representative, Subconsul Drestar, rose from his position near the top of the chamber, a place of privilege afforded to founding members. These materials were obtained through an act of war against the Empire. They cannot be considered as evidence in these proceedings. An act of war? Eliza repeated incredulously. You invaded our space with a battle fleet. You fired on our ships. Your own battle plans, also recovered from the Inevitable Dominion, detail your intention to bombard Earth's surface and execute what you specifically termed population reduction measures. The chamber erupted again, this time with even greater furor. Species that normally remained neutral in Confederation politics were visibly agitated, representatives conferring urgently with their delegations. The Empire's internal security documents are not subject to Confederation oversight, Drestar insisted. This is a violation of our sovereignty. Interesting definition of internal security, Eliza replied dryly. I wasn't aware that planning genocide on other worlds fell under that category. Ambassador Krell had been uncharacteristically silent throughout the proceedings, but now he rose from his seat. Speaker, if I may address the Assembly? The ancient Jurisian nodded his permission. What we are witnessing today is unprecedented, Krell began, his voice solemn. In 15,000 cycles of Confederation history, we have never faced such a moment. The evidence presented by the human delegation is troubling, to say the least. Ambassador Krell, Drestar interrupted. Surely the Vreeland Consortium cannot support this blatant attempt by a junior species to destabilize the established order. That established order has allowed your empire to commit atrocities with impunity, Krell replied, surprising everyone, perhaps even himself. For too long, many of us have accepted a peace that benefits the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. The Vreeland people can no longer be complicit in this. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the chamber. The Vreelands had always been staunch supporters of tradition and protocol, reliable allies of the founding members. The Duranti Federation stands with Earth, announced the avian ambassador, rising dramatically with wings half extended in a formal posture of alliance. The Miltari Union also stands with Earth, burbled their gelatinous representative. One by one, representatives rose, predominantly from the middle and lower tiers of the chamber, species that had suffered under Xixian expansionism, while the Confederation deliberated endlessly on appropriate responses. Drestar's color darkened to a deep purple of rage. This is sedition. The founding charter clearly states— We've all read the charter, Eliza interrupted. We've also read the classified Xixian military directive that refers to it as a convenient fiction to keep lesser species docile, while the true powers determine the course of galactic civilization. Your words, not mine. The holographic display shifted to show exactly that document, with the damning phrase highlighted in pulsing red. The presiding speaker's clicking grew loud enough to cut through the renewed uproar. What exactly are you proposing, Commander Harper? What does Earth want from these proceedings? Eliza took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Earth proposes 3 immediate actions. First, the Confederation must acknowledge its failure to uphold its own founding principles and commit to meaningful reform. Second, a peacekeeping force comprised of ships from all member worlds, not just the founding species, must be established to actually enforce Confederation law. And third, she paused, looking directly at the Xixian delegation. The Empire must withdraw from all territories acquired through force over the past 2 centuries and make reparations to the affected populations. Preposterous! Drezatar spat. The Empire will never submit to such humiliation. Then the Empire will face the consequences, Eliza said simply. Already 34 species have signed mutual defense pacts with Earth. If the Tsixians want war, they'll get it, but not just with humans this time. The presiding speaker raised all 4 of his arms for silence. This body cannot vote on such momentous proposals without proper deliberation. I propose we adjourn to allow delegations to consult with their governments. With respect, Speaker, Eliza countered. We've had 15,000 cycles of deliberation while people suffered and died. Earth calls for an immediate vote on our proposals. Seconded, called the Duranti ambassador. Thirded, added the Miltari representative. The speaker's ancient eyes blinked in surprise. Such a procedure hadn't been invoked in living memory, but it was indeed provided for in the most fundamental Confederation protocols, a fail-safe mechanism for times of crisis. Very well, he conceded. The Assembly will vote. What followed was perhaps the most dramatic vote in Confederation history. As the tally grew, it became clear that a seismic shift was occurring in the power dynamics that had governed interstellar politics for millennia. When the final results appeared above the speaker's platform, even Eliza seemed stunned by the margin. 112 in favor, 35 opposed. The proposals are adopted, the speaker announced, his voice carrying the weight of history. May the cosmos guide us through the changes to come. As the chamber dissolved into a cacophony of voices, Krell made his way to Eliza's side. Well, Commander, he said quietly, it seems humans have accomplished in months what others couldn't manage in centuries. We had help, Eliza replied, nodding toward the many delegations that had supported Earth's position. Indeed, but it took your species' particular directness to catalyze this change. Krell's color shifted to a thoughtful blue. I must ask, would you really have gone to war with the entire Xixian Empire if they had refused to back down? Eliza's expression turned serious. In human history, we've learned one lesson over and over. Appeasement never works against tyrants. It just emboldens them and leads to greater suffering in the end. And now? Krell asked. What happens now that you've upended the galactic order? Eliza looked out at the chamber, at representatives of species from across the cosmos, some jubilant, others uncertain, a few clearly hostile, and smiled. Now the real work begins, she said, building something better. 6 months later, Commander, now Ambassador, Eliza Harper stood in the observation lounge of Diplomatic Station Gamma 7, staring out at the stars. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. The station itself was now bustling with activity as the headquarters for the newly formed Confederation peacekeeping force. Ships from dozens of member worlds were visible in the distance, conducting joint exercises, a sight unimaginable less than a year ago. Enjoying the fruits of your labor? A familiar voice asked. Eliza turned to see Krell approaching, his ceremonial diplomatic sash now adorned with the additional insignia of his new position as coordinator of Reformation initiatives. Just taking a moment, she replied. It's been a busy few months. The busiest in Confederation history, I'd wager, Krell said, coming to stand beside her at the viewport. The Xixians have withdrawn from 16 disputed systems already, though their compliance remains grudging. They'll adapt, Eliza said. They don't have much choice. No thanks to that battleship you're constructing in orbit around Mars, Krell observed dryly. The consequence, I believe you've named it, subtle, Eliza grinned. We thought it sent the right message. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as a Duranti cruiser executed a perfect synchronized maneuver with 2 human frigates. I've been meaning to ask you something, Krell said finally. That day when the Xixians first attacked, you seemed almost prepared, as if you'd been expecting something like this. We were, Eliza admitted. Not specifically from the Xixians, but we knew someone would eventually test us. Human history is full of expansionist empires making the same miscalculation. That's not what I meant, Krell pressed. Your defensive capabilities, those weapons the Xixians had never encountered before, those weren't developed overnight. No, Eliza agreed quietly. They weren't. How long? Krell asked. How long had Earth been preparing for war, while presenting itself as just another peaceful new member of the galactic community? Eliza turned to face him fully. From the moment we first made contact and learned about the true state of galactic politics. From the first time we heard about a smaller species being culturally integrated against their will while the Confederation wrung its hands and did nothing. You were always planning to challenge the system, Krell realized. We were planning to survive, Eliza corrected. And to help others survive too. There's a difference. Many would call that deceptive. Many would be right, but sometimes deception is necessary when facing an opponent who doesn't fight fair. She sighed. What would you have had us do, Krell? Walk blindly into a system stacked against newcomers? Hope that the Confederation's peaceful principles would protect us when we could see they weren't protecting anyone else? Krell's antennae twitched thoughtfully. I suppose when you put it that way, it's hard to argue with the results. The Reformation Accords have already done more to restore balance than centuries of traditional diplomacy. And they'll do more still, Eliza said firmly. The joint scientific initiative between Earth and the Miltari has already yielded breakthroughs in faster-than-light communications. The Duranti-Human Cultural Exchange Program is thriving. Even some of the older Confederation members are starting to see the benefits of true cooperation. All because you humans decided to punch the biggest bully in the galaxy square in the mandibles, Krell observed with what might have been admiration. I still don't understand how you knew you could win that first battle. The Xixian fleet outmatched yours by every conventional metric. Eliza smiled enigmatically. That's the thing about humanity, Krell. We've been fighting against impossible odds since we crawled out of the mud. It's practically our specialty. So, I'm beginning to understand. The Vreeland diplomat's color shifted to a contemplative shade of blue-green. There's something else that's been bothering me. When you released those Xixian military files to the Confederation Assembly, you seemed to know exactly which ones would have the most impact, almost as if we'd been collecting intelligence on the Empire for years? Eliza finished for him. We had, from the moment we discovered how they treated their protectorates. But how? The Xixian security protocols are legendary. We're good at finding backdoors, Eliza said simply. And we're even better at building alliances with people who have reasons to hate their oppressors. Krell's eyes widened. You had help from within the Empire? Let's just say not all species under Xixian control were as accepting of their fate as they appeared to be. When we started making discreet inquiries about the true nature of the cultural integration programs, we found no shortage of individuals willing to share information. A nearby commotion interrupted their conversation as a group of officers entered the lounge, an eclectic mix of species from across the Confederation, all wearing the newly established peacekeeping force insignia. Ambassador Harper, called a young human lieutenant. Admiral Wells is requesting your presence. The Xixian delegation has arrived for the treaty formalization. Duty calls, Eliza said to Krell. Care to join me? As coordinator of Reformation initiatives, your presence would be appropriate. I wouldn't miss it, Krell replied, falling into step beside her. Though I must admit, I never thought I'd live to see a Xixian Grand Admiral sign a treaty limiting their military operations. Technically, he's a former Grand Admiral now, Eliza corrected. The Empire's leadership restructuring was quite thorough after the revelations about their military conduct. They made their way through the station's bustling corridors, passing representatives from dozens of species working together in a way that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. I'm curious, Krell said as they approached the main conference chamber. If the Xixians hadn't attacked when they did, if they'd been more patient, built up more forces, perhaps approached from multiple vectors, would your plan still have worked? Eliza paused, her expression growing serious. We'll never know for certain. But what I do know is that humanity has a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We weren't willing to do nothing, no matter the cost. A dangerous philosophy, Krell observed. So is assuming someone else will fix the galaxy's problems, she countered. Dangerous philosophies all around. The conference chamber doors slid open before them, revealing a large gathering of diplomats and military officials. At the center table sat a Xixian delegation, their once proud postures now subdued. Ambassador Harper, greeted the lead Xixian, rising with formal courtesy. The Empire is grateful for your willingness to finalize these accords in person. Not at all, Consul Vextoral, Eliza replied smoothly. Earth looks forward to a new era of genuine cooperation with the Xixian people. Your civilian scientific achievements have much to offer the galactic community. As they took their seats and the formalities began, Krell leaned over to whisper to Eliza. You've done the impossible, you know. You've fundamentally changed a power structure that has existed for millennia. We had help, she whispered back, nodding toward the representatives of formerly marginalized species now seated prominently around the chamber. Lots of it. Yes, but it took humanity's particular brand of, what's the phrase, take no shit? Eliza nearly choked, trying to suppress her laughter. Ambassador Krell, I believe your translator is malfunctioning. Oh, it's not the translator, he replied with a Vreelan approximation of a wink. I've been studying human idioms, fascinating linguistic constructs. As the proceedings continued, Eliza found herself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. From humanity's humble position as newcomers to the galactic stage to becoming the catalyst for the most significant political restructuring in Confederation history. It had been a journey no one could have predicted. Well, almost no one. Admiral Victoria Wells stood at the window of her office in Earth Defense Force headquarters, looking out at the busy shipyards of Mars orbit. The massive form of the battleship Consequence dominated the view, its final weapon systems being installed under the watchful eyes of engineers from 6 different species. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter!" she called, not turning from the window. The door slid open to admit General Marcus Reeves, the newly appointed commander of the Confederation Joint Security Forces. Despite the prestigious appointment, he still moved with the no-nonsense efficiency of the career soldier he was. "Admiral," he greeted her, "the treaty's been signed. Ambassador Harper just transmitted confirmation from Gamma 7. "Good," Wells nodded. "And our other initiatives?" "Proceeding as planned. The Duranti have agreed to host the advanced research facility in their home system. The Miltari are incorporating our stealth technology into their surveillance network. And the Caledonian engineers think they've solved the phase-shifting problem with the shield generators." Wells finally turned from the window, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "All according to the timetable, then?" "More or less," Reeves confirmed. "Though I have to say, the speed of these alliances has surprised even our most optimistic projections." "Apparently all the galaxy needed was someone to stand up to the playground bully," Wells remarked, moving to her desk and activating a holographic display showing the current distribution of Confederation peacekeeping forces throughout the sector. "How are our new allies adapting to the joint command structure?" "Better than expected. Turns out a lot of species were just waiting for permission to show what they're capable of when not being constantly intimidated by the bigger powers." "And the Tsixians? How are they dealing with their reduced circumstances?" Reeves shrugged. "About as well as you'd expect from an empire that's never known defeat. Their military is in disarray, their leadership is fractured, and their subject worlds are demanding greater autonomy. It'll be generations before they're a threat again, if ever." "Don't underestimate them," Wells cautioned. "Pride like theirs doesn't disappear overnight. Which is why we're keeping the Consequence and her sister ships on accelerated production schedules," Reeves acknowledged. "Trust but verify, as the old saying goes." Wells nodded, studying the tactical display with practiced eyes. "And what about the other former power players? The Jurisians, the Voloth Directorate? Watching and waiting. They're not happy about the new order, but after what happened to the Tsixians, they're reluctant to test humanity's resolve." "Good." Wells deactivated the display. "And Project Lighthouse?" Reeves's expression grew more serious. "Initial outposts are established in the predicted locations. If anything comes through from beyond the rim, we'll have advance warning." "Excellent." The Admiral moved back to the window, her gaze now fixed not on the shipyards, but on the stars beyond. "Because I suspect that Tsixians may be the least of our concerns in the grand scheme of things. You still believe the intercepts from deep space are genuine?" "Don't you?" Wells countered. "Those energy signatures didn't come from any known civilization in the Confederation, and they're getting stronger." Reeves joined her at the window. "If you're right, we might have upended the galactic order just in time." "That's my hope," Wells said quietly. "The old Confederation would have debated appropriate responses until it was too late. The new one might actually stand a fighting chance. Thanks to humanity's particular brand of diplomacy," Reeves observed with dry humor. "We prefer to think of it as proactive negotiation," Wells replied with a small smile. "After all, nothing says let's talk quite like a demonstration of what happens if we don't." "Is that going to be our approach moving forward? Show of force first, dialogue second?" Wells considered the question seriously. "No. Force is a tool, not a solution. What humanity brought to the galactic stage wasn't just our military capabilities, but our history. Thousands of years of learning, often the hard way. How societies rise and fall. How empires that rely solely on might eventually crumble. How true strength comes from cooperation, innovation, and yes, when necessary, the willingness to fight for what's right." She turned to face the general directly. "The Tsixians needed to learn that lesson first because they were the immediate threat. But our real mission has always been bigger than one battle or one reform movement. It's about preparing this entire corner of the galaxy for what's coming next. And if nothing's coming? Reeves asked. If those deep space signals turn out to be nothing more than stellar phenomena? Then we've still created a more just, more balanced interstellar community? Wells replied. One where being different doesn't mean being dominated. One where technological innovation is shared rather than hoarded. One where smaller voices still get heard. Not bad for humanity's first century in space, Reeves admitted. We're just getting started, Wells said, her gaze returning to the stars. This isn't the end of our story. It's barely the beginning. Somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, something stirred. It had no name, no form that could be understood by the carbon-based intelligences of the Milky Way. It simply was, an ancient awareness that had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations across countless star systems. For millions of years, it had observed the slow spread of life throughout the galaxy, watching with detached curiosity as primitive species discovered fire, agriculture, mathematics, spaceflight. Most flared briefly and disappeared, destroying themselves or falling victim to natural disasters before reaching true potential. Some, however, persisted, grew, expanded beyond their homeworlds to touch the stars themselves. The Zixians had been promising for a time, aggressive, adaptable, relentless in their pursuit of dominance. But ultimately they had stagnated, becoming little more than bullies in a cosmic playground. The Miltari had intelligence but lacked ambition. The Duranti had vision but insufficient drive. The Vreelands had stability but feared change too much to evolve. But these humans, they were different. In mere centuries, they had progressed from primitive combustion engines to faster-than-light travel. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times but had always pulled back from the brink, learning and adapting. And now, in their first interactions with the wider galactic community, they had not only survived an encounter with the dominant military power, but had fundamentally reshaped the power dynamics of an entire sector. Most intriguingly, they had done so not through overwhelming technological superiority or numerical advantage, but through a combination of tactical innovation, strategic foresight, and an almost inexplicable ability to form alliances across species boundaries. For the first time in many millennia, the ancient observer felt something akin to interest, perhaps even anticipation. These humans bear watching. The thought rippled across the void, causing a momentary disturbance in the fabric of space-time, minor enough to go unnoticed by most, but detectable to the sensitive instruments of Earth's deep space monitoring network. In her office, Admiral Wells looked up sharply as a priority alert flashed across her screen. Another signal from beyond the rim, stronger than any previous detection. She smiled grimly. Right on schedule. The game was just beginning. 2 years later, Commander Eliza Harper, now Director Harper of the Confederation Diplomatic Corps, stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching as representatives from 147 species gathered for the formal ratification of the new Confederation Charter. Beside her stood Krell, his once bright plumage now showing signs of age, but his eyes as sharp as ever. "Did you ever imagine we'd get here?" she asked him quietly. "Not in my lifetime," he admitted. "Perhaps not in 1,000 lifetimes. And yet, here we are." Below them, the massive assembly hall buzzed with activity as delegates finalized the details of the most comprehensive interstellar agreement in recorded history. Gone were the tiered seating arrangements that had physically embodied the power hierarchy of the old Confederation. In their place was a circular chamber where all representatives sat as equals. "Your people have much to be proud of," Krell continued. "In less than a decade, you've accomplished what generations of reformers could only dream about." "We had help," Eliza said, nodding toward the diverse gathering. "We just provided the catalyst." "An explosive catalyst," Krell observed dryly. "Sometimes that's what's needed to break through centuries of inertia." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Eliza tapped her earpiece. "Harper here?" "Director," came Admiral Wells' voice. "Project Lighthouse has confirmed. The signals are definitely artificial and definitely approaching. Estimated arrival in Confederation space, 18 months. Eliza's expression remained neutral, but her pulse quickened. "Understood. Proceed with Phase 3 implementation. I'll inform the Council after the charter signing." She ended the call to find Krell studying her intently. "Not good news, I take it?" he asked. Eliza hesitated, then made a decision. If the new Confederation was to truly be different from the old, it needed to start with honesty between allies. "We've been detecting anomalous energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim for several years," she explained. At first, they were dismissed as sensor ghosts or natural phenomena, but they've been growing stronger, more frequent, and definitely moving in our direction. Krell's antennae went rigid with shock. An extragalactic civilization? Are you certain? As certain as we can be without direct contact, Eliza confirmed. And given the energy output required to generate signals detectable across such distances, they're significantly more advanced than anything in the Confederation, Krell finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Potentially, yes. Krell was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. This is why, he said finally. This is why Earth pushed so hard for the reforms, for the joint defense initiatives, for the technology sharing programs. You weren't just fixing the Confederation's internal problems, you were preparing for an external threat. We were doing both, Eliza corrected. The old Confederation wasn't just unjust, it was dangerously fragmented. If these visitors turn out to be hostile, a galaxy divided against itself would have no chance. And if they're peaceful? Then we'll greet them as a unified galactic community rather than a collection of squabbling factions, she replied. Either way, we're stronger together than apart. Below them, the assembly had fallen silent as the presiding speaker, no longer a Juretian by tradition, but a Caledonian who had been democratically elected, called for the formal vote on the charter. One by one, representatives signaled their assent. Even the Zixian delegate, now representing a chastened empire struggling to redefine itself, raised a claw in agreement. When the final vote was tallied, unanimous for the first time in Confederation history, a spontaneous cheer erupted throughout the chamber. A new beginning, Krell said softly. Let's hope so, Eliza replied, because whatever's coming, we'll face it together. As if on cue, the massive viewports of Unity Station aligned to reveal the breathtaking spectacle of the combined Confederation fleet. Ships of every size and design from worlds across the galaxy, all flying in perfect formation. At the center, like the tip of a spear, flew the Earth vessels that had catalyzed this transformation. They begged for help, Krell mused, recalling the desperate pleas of species oppressed under the old order. And humanity answered with total war. Not against people, Eliza corrected gently. Against injustice, against complacency, against the idea that power gives you the right to dominate others. Krell's color shifted to a warm gold, the Vreelan expression of respect. Well said, Director Harper. Well said, indeed. Together they watched as the fleet executed a perfect synchronized maneuver, a testament to what was possible when different species worked together rather than against each other. Whatever was coming from beyond the rim would find not a fragmented collection of competing powers, but a unified galactic civilization standing ready, stronger together than any single species could be alone. And at the heart of that unity stood humanity, young, brash, and uncompromising in their belief that everyone deserved to be free. The ancient observer, still tracking from the darkness between the stars, noted this development with something approaching satisfaction. Perhaps at long last it had found worthy adversaries, or allies, in this small corner of the cosmos. Only time would tell. The end. Lieutenant James Harper stared incredulously at the alien diplomat, whose 6 eyes blinked in asynchronous patterns that James had learned indicated amusement. The Zolaxian's translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent pulses, their equivalent of chuckling. The Galactic Council has determined that humanity must prove its physical adaptability before being granted full membership status, Ambassador Krell Thax explained, mandibles clicking. All species must pass at least one of the standard aptitude tests. The zero-gravity obstacle course has never been completed successfully, but it remains an option. James ran a hand through his military-cropped hair. 2 months into his assignment as Earth's first liaison to the Galactic Council, and he was still stumbling into these bizarre diplomatic situations. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that in 300 years not one species has completed this course? Not even the Valorians with their 4 arms? Or the Netheri who literally evolved in minimal gravity? Krell Thax's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. The Valorians suffered multiple fractures attempting the needle thread section. The Netheri... well, the footage is classified, but let's just say the cleanup required specialized equipment. And you think humans can do it? Actually, no. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Zolaxian version of a dismissive snort. We expect you'll fail like everyone else, but protocol dictates we must offer all potential member species the full range of qualification options. James narrowed his eyes. Something in the ambassador's tone sounded suspiciously like a dare. Growing up with 3 older brothers had conditioned him to recognize when someone was baiting him, regardless of the speaker's species or number of appendages. What's the current record? How far has anyone gotten? The ambassador's upper limbs made a gesture James had come to recognize as the galactic equivalent of a shrug. The Cybernetians reached the spinning corridor before their stabilizing systems malfunctioned. They made it approximately 37% through the course. And what happens if, hypothetically, a human completes it? All 6 of Krelthak's eyes focused on James with sudden intensity. In that extremely improbable scenario, humanity would immediately advance to Level 2 membership status, bypassing several decades of the typical integration process. James leaned back in his chair, which automatically adjusted to his shifting weight. Just tell me about the course. The next 20 minutes were filled with a mind-numbing technical briefing about the obstacle course's various sections, complete with holographic projections showing spectacular failures from other species. James paid particular attention to the areas where most competitors had been eliminated. The spinning corridor with its unpredictable rotating cylinders, the needle thread, a narrow passage through electrified poles, the gravity wells, pockets of alternating gravitational forces that had apparently turned a 6-limbed draconian diplomat into what the briefing diplomatically called organic confetti. You mentioned protective gear? James asked when the horror show finally concluded. Kowalski's antenna twitched. Yes, though previous competitors found most protective measures actually hindered their progress. The technicians outfitted him with a lightweight suit that reminded James of the compression gear Olympic swimmers wore, except this material was alive, responding to his movements, temperature, and even adapting its thickness based on nearby hazards. This is actually pretty impressive, James admitted, flexing his arms and feeling the material adjust perfectly. It is a Feralian symbiotic defense membrane, the stick insect explained. It will attempt to protect you from lacerations, electrical discharges, and excessive friction. It cannot, however, prevent broken bones, internal injuries, or psychological trauma. Good to know. Kowalski guided him to an airlock-like chamber that apparently served as the course entrance. Before you enter, I am obligated to ask once more, are you certain you wish to proceed? No species has completed this course. Many consider attempting it to be a form of elaborate suicide. James took a deep breath. Look, if I back out now, humanity gets stuck in bureaucratic limbo for another decade, right? That is correct, though still preferable to death, by most metrics. Well, humans aren't great at accepting limitations. Let's do this. As James floated into the starting chamber, he heard the gas cloud technician emit a series of melodic tones. What did Mist of Thought say? He asked. Kowalski hesitated before answering. The closest translation would be, another species learns nothing from history. Though in their language, it's also a traditional farewell to the soon-to-be deceased. The door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, leaving James alone in the spherical chamber. Screens on all sides flickered to life, displaying what must have been viewing galleries filled with various alien species. Apparently, his suicide attempt was going to be quite the spectator sport. A countdown began, displayed in both standard galactic numerals and Earth Arabic numbers. James oriented himself toward the first obstacle, a series of rapidly opening and closing iris-like portals. Ellis, you getting all this? He murmured. Affirmative, Lieutenant, the AI replied. I have also taken the liberty of sending a message to your mother telling her you love her. Oh, for crying out! The starting signal blared, and the first iris portal opened. The first section of the course, the iris gauntlet, wasn't actually that bad. The timing was tricky, but James quickly got the hang of tucking himself into a ball and shooting through the rapidly opening and closing circular doorways. His swim team experience from college proved surprisingly relevant in the zero-G environment. Current progress 12% complete, Ellis informed him. You have already surpassed 11 species records. That's encouraging, James grunted, narrowly avoiding being sliced in half as an iris snapped shut inches from his foot. What's next? The ricochet chamber, sir. James emerged from the final iris portal into a large spherical room lined with glowing panels. As soon as his body completely entered the chamber, the panels began firing pulses of force in seemingly random patterns. Shit, he yelled as a pulse caught him in the shoulder, sending him spinning toward the opposite wall, where another pulse immediately ricocheted him in yet another direction. It was like being trapped inside an interdimensional pinball machine. Through sheer luck, he managed to curl into a protective position as he bounced wildly around the chamber. Each impact was cushioned somewhat by the responsive suit, but after about 30 seconds, he felt like one giant bruise. This is, ridiculous, he gasped between impacts. How is any, species supposed to navigate this? According to the specifications, competitors are meant to analyze the pattern and time their movements accordingly, Ellis replied calmly. The pulses repeat every 17.3 seconds. Now you tell me! James shouted, trying desperately to control his tumbling. On the next impact, he managed to extend his arms and legs at just the right moment, absorbing the force and stabilizing himself briefly against a wall panel before it could fire again. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Ellis, count down to the next pattern restart. Pattern reset in 3, 2, 1. Now. James launched himself toward the exit on the far side of the sphere, timing his movements to slip between the force pulses rather than being hit by them. He wasn't entirely successful. 2 glancing blows sent him slightly off course, but he managed to correct and reach the exit portal with only minor additional bruising. Current progress 21% complete, Ellis announced. Congratulations, you have now surpassed the Arcturian record. Fantastic, James muttered, massaging his shoulder. What's the next torture device? The spinning corridor. This is where the cybernetians were eliminated. The corridor ahead consisted of a series of concentric cylinders, each rotating in a different direction and at a different speed. Between the cylinders were narrow gaps that he would need to navigate through. The challenge was immediately apparent. Time the rotations wrong, and he'd be crushed between multi-ton spinning tubes. Any advice, Ellis? Don't get crushed, sir. Very helpful. James studied the rotation patterns, trying to identify a safe path through. The problem was that each cylinder's rotation seemed deliberately designed to create minimal windows of opportunity where all the gaps aligned. Then he noticed something, a pattern in the rotational speeds. He wasn't certain, but... Ellis, analyze the cylinder rotations. Are they following some kind of mathematical sequence? A brief pause. Yes, Lieutenant. The rotational periods follow a modified Fibonacci sequence with a base 7 numerical system. How did you identify that? James grinned. I didn't. But aliens love patterns, and I needed to know if this was random or predictable. Now predict when the next full alignment will occur. Alignment in 47 seconds. Mark. As Ellis counted down, James positioned himself at the corridor entrance, muscles tensed and ready. When the countdown reached 0, he shot forward, streamlining his body like a torpedo. The first gap aligned perfectly as he passed through. The second was starting to close, but he made it. By the third, he was already slightly off the optimal timing. Correction needed, 15 degrees starboard, Ellis warned. James twisted his body, pushing off against the edge of the cylinder with his fingertips to adjust his trajectory. The fourth gap was barely wide enough, forcing him to exhale completely to squeeze through. Final cylinder approaching. Gap alignment suboptimal, Ellis reported, its normally calm voice displaying a hint of urgency. The last gap was already half closed. In a split-second decision, James rotated himself perpendicular to his travel direction, essentially edging through the narrowing space sideways. The cylinder edge brushed against the suit, which instantly stiffened to prevent him from being crushed. Then he was through, tumbling into the open space beyond. Current progress 39% complete, Ellis announced. You have exceeded all previous records. The viewing screens around the course perimeter showed alien spectators in what appeared to be various states of shock. One furry creature with 3 trunks appeared to have spilled its drink all over its neighbors. What's next? James asked, trying to sound casual despite his racing heart. The needle thread. This is where most of the serious injuries have occurred. The chamber ahead contained a forest of electrified poles, each crackling with energy. They weren't stationary either. They moved in complex patterns, occasionally touching and sending arcs of electricity between them. Well, that looks absolutely delightful, James muttered. He studied the moving poles, trying to identify a safe path. There didn't seem to be one. Any route he visualized was eventually blocked by moving poles or crackling electrical arcs. Unless... Ellis, what's the composition of those poles? Primarily a conductive alloy of... No, I mean, are they solid all the way through, or hollow? A brief pause. Sensors indicate they are hollow tubes with a conductive outer layer. James nodded to himself. And the electrical charge, is it constant or pulsed? Pulsed, with a frequency of approximately 0.8 seconds. A plan formed in James's mind. Possibly a terrible plan, but it was better than trying to navigate through that electrical death trap. Ellis, I need you to precisely time those electrical pulses. May I ask what you're planning, Lieutenant? James grinned. Something incredibly stupid. On my mark, give me a countdown to the next pulse. He positioned himself at the entrance to the needle thread, eyes focused on a particularly thick pole near the center of the chamber. As Ellis counted down, James launched himself directly at it, seemingly on a collision course. Pulse in 3, 2, 1. The electricity arced between the poles, and in that split second after the pulse, but before the next one, James grabbed the thick central pole and pulled himself inside it. Right. The hollow tube was just wide enough to admit his body. New pulse in 0.8 seconds, Lieutenant. James kicked off from the interior wall of the tube, shooting up through it like a human bullet. He emerged from the top just as the next pulse fired, missing him by milliseconds. His momentum carried him to another tube, which he again entered from the top and used as a protected channel to travel closer to the exit. Using this method, treating the electrified death forest as a network of safe travel tubes rather than obstacles to navigate around, James made his way through the needle thread in under a minute. As he emerged from the final tube, the alien observers had gone absolutely berserk. A group of tentacled creatures were waving their appendages so frantically they'd tied themselves into knots. Several crystalline beings had literally shattered in apparent shock. Current progress 58% complete, Ellis informed him, its voice now tinged with what sounded suspiciously like excitement. Lieutenant, you've doubled the previous course record. James allowed himself a moment of pride before focusing on the challenge ahead. What's next? The gravity wells. This is where the organic confetti incident occurred. The chamber before him appeared deceptively empty, just a large open space. But as James watched, small objects, presumably test materials, were periodically released into the room. Some were violently compressed into tiny balls. Others were stretched and torn apart. Still others were flung at incredible speeds into the walls. I'm guessing those are the gravity wells? He asked, watching a metal sphere the size of a baseball suddenly flatten into a disc. Correct. The chamber contains 27 localized gravity fields of varying strength and direction. They shift position every 12 seconds. James frowned. Can you map them? Attempting to map now. After a moment, Ellis continued. I can provide approximate locations, but the precise boundaries are difficult to determine without more sensitive equipment. So basically, I need to cross a minefield of invisible gravity anomalies that will either crush me, tear me apart, or smash me into a wall. That is an accurate assessment, yes. James took a deep breath, watching another test object get pulverized. Right. Let's try something unconventional. He reached for a panel on his suit and detached a small emergency beacon, standard equipment for space operations. Activating it, he tossed it gently into the chamber. The beacon drifted peacefully for about 3 seconds before suddenly accelerating upward, then stopping abruptly, then being compressed to half its original size. Ellis, track that beacon's movements. Map the gravity wells it encounters. Processing. This method will only reveal a partial map of the field. Better than nothing. James watched carefully as the beacon was tossed around the chamber, mentally noting each location where it changed direction or was affected by gravity. After about 2 minutes, he had identified what he believed were the positions of at least 15 of the 27 wells. The fields will shift position in 5 seconds, Ellis warned. That's my window. Without further hesitation, James launched himself into the chamber, aiming for a path he believed would be momentarily clear of gravity wells. He made it about halfway across before feeling the first pull, a gentle but insistent tug to his left. Rather than fight it, James allowed it to alter his course, using the momentum to slingshot toward what his mental map suggested was a safe corridor. The technique worked, sort of. He was yanked, pushed, and twisted by various gravity fields, but by going with the forces rather than against them, he managed to avoid the most dangerous compressions and accelerations. It was like riding a series of invisible waves, each one threatening to overwhelm him but instead propelling him closer to his goal. 3 seconds to field shift, Ellis warned as James approached the exit. He was still about 10 meters away when he felt an immense pressure at his back. One of the strongest wells had shifted directly behind him. In desperation, he tucked himself into a ball as the gravity field essentially catapulted him toward the exit. He shot through the exit portal like a human cannonball, tumbling into the next chamber at a speed that would have seriously injured him had the suit not immediately stiffened to absorb the impact against the far wall. Current progress 79% complete, Ellis announced, voice now undeniably excited. Lieutenant, you're approaching completion parameters! The alien spectators had gone absolutely wild. Some appeared to be exchanging what might have been currency. Others seemed to be in various states of physiological distress. A large gelatinous creature had apparently fainted, coating several of its neighbors in translucent slime. James gathered himself, breathing heavily. What's left? The final challenge, the vortex. The chamber ahead contained what appeared to be a literal tornado of something. Not air exactly, but a swirling mass of particulate matter that gleamed and shimmered in the light. The vortex extended from wall to wall, completely blocking the path to the finish line visible beyond. What is that thing? James asked, staring at the beautiful but obviously deadly phenomenon. A magnetogravitic vortex containing suspended microparticulates of various superdense elements. Contact with human skin would result in immediate lacerations. Prolonged exposure would strip flesh from bone. Of course it would, James sighed. Can't the final challenge just be a nice cup of tea and a sit-down? He studied the vortex, looking for weaknesses or patterns. Unlike the previous obstacles, this one seemed genuinely impassable. The swirling matter filled the entire chamber from wall to wall, with no gaps or safe passages visible. Ellis, any ideas? None that wouldn't result in your immediate demise, Lieutenant. James frowned, watching the vortex's movement. The particulate matter swirled in a consistent pattern, spinning faster toward the center and slower at the edges. It reminded him of something. Ellis, what's generating this vortex? There must be some kind of emitter or gravitational source. Analysis suggests a central gravitational oscillator creating a stable toroidal flow pattern. In English, please? There's a device in the middle making everything spin in a donut shape. James nodded slowly, an idea forming. And this particulate matter, would the suit protect me from it? Briefly, the symbiotic membrane would provide approximately 8.3 seconds of protection before degradation. And how long would it take to get through the vortex to the other side? At optimal speed and trajectory, 12.7 seconds. So I'd be shredded before I made it through. Fantastic. James continued studying the vortex, focusing now on its rotation. What about the center, the eye of the storm? Theoretically less dangerous due to reduced particulate velocity, but the gravitational forces would be extreme. James's eyes lit up. But if I could reach the center, I could potentially use that gravitational force to slingshot through to the other side, like a spacecraft using a planet's gravity well. The mathematics suggest it's possible, but reaching the center without being shredded is still problematic. James stared at the vortex, his mind racing. Then his gaze fell on his suit's control panel, specifically the emergency propulsion system designed for zero-G rescue operations. It wasn't meant for precision maneuvering, but... Ellis, I'm going to try something. If I don't make it, make sure my recording gets back to Earth with a note saying, "Hold my beer." I don't understand the reference, but I will comply. James took a deep breath, positioning himself at the entrance to the vortex chamber. He activated the suit's propulsion system, feeling the small thrusters come online at his wrists and ankles. Here goes nothing. He launched himself toward the vortex, but instead of trying to go through it, he aimed for the wall just beside the entrance. Using the thrusters to adjust his trajectory, he kicked off from the wall at an angle, essentially beginning to orbit the outside of the vortex. What are you doing, Lieutenant? Something humans call wall running, except in 3 dimensions, James replied, using the thrusters and strategic pushes against the chamber wall to maintain his orbital path around the vortex. Each circuit brought him a little closer to the swirling mass without actually entering it. The alien spectators were going absolutely berserk now. A group of methane breathers had become so excited they'd ignited their own atmosphere. Security drones were frantically trying to extinguish them. As James completed his 3rd orbit, he made his move. Firing all thrusters at maximum, he launched himself not into the vortex, but at the small space between the vortex and the ceiling. The gap was tiny, barely wide enough for his body, but it was there. For a heart-stopping moment, he felt the particulate matter beginning to abrade his suit as he skimmed the very upper edge of the vortex. The symbiotic membrane hardened instantly, sacrificing its outer layers to protect him. Suit integrity at 62% and falling, Ellis warned. But James was already past the worst of it, his momentum carrying him to the far side of the chamber. He extended his arms just in time to absorb the impact with the wall beside the exit portal. Current progress, 100% complete. Course completed, Ellis announced, actual emotion evident in its synthetic voice. Lieutenant, you've done it! James floated through the final portal into a reception area where a crowd of stunned alien officials awaited. Their expressions ranged from shock to disbelief to what might have been outrage. Ambassador Krell Thax floated forward, all 6 eyes blinking rapidly. That was impossible, the Zalaxian stammered, mandibles clicking in agitation. No species has ever completed the course. James grinned, despite every muscle in his body screaming in protest. Well, technically I didn't complete it either. What? But you reached the end. I didn't go through the final obstacle. I went around it. There's a difference. A murmur ran through the gathered aliens. Krelthak's skin flashed with bioluminescent patterns that James recognized as confusion mixed with indignation. That's not how it's meant to be done. Did the rules specifically state that competitors had to go through each obstacle rather than finding alternative routes? James asked innocently. The ambassador's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment. Well, no, but... Then I completed your course according to the established parameters. James's grin widened. Unless you're saying that the mighty Galactic Council didn't think to make rules against thinking outside the box? The gathered officials burst into a cacophony of translated arguments. Some were gesticulating with various appendages. Others were consulting data tablets and rule books. One particularly agitated jellyfish-like being was squirting jets of colored liquid in what appeared to be a pattern of formal protest. Eventually, a tall, reedy alien with metallic skin and glowing eyes, clearly someone of importance, raised a seven-fingered hand for silence. I am High Administrator Zixtel, it announced, its voice somehow both melodious and grating simultaneously. Having reviewed the parameters of the challenge, I must confirm that technically, Lieutenant Harper has indeed completed the course. Another burst of chaotic reaction swept through the crowd. However, the administrator continued, the spirit of the challenge was clearly to test physical adaptability by overcoming each obstacle directly. James's heart sank. Here came the disqualification. Yet, Zixtel raised its voice. It is precisely this lateral thinking, as humans call it, that makes new species valuable to our Galactic Council. The ability to see beyond established parameters and find unexpected solutions is rare. The administrator floated closer to James. In 300 years, no species has thought to attempt the course as you did. They all accepted the apparent rules without question. That, Lieutenant Harper, may be more impressive than physical prowess. James blinked in surprise. So, odd. Does that mean humanity passes? High Administrator Zixtel made a gesture that might have been the galactic equivalent of a smile. It means, Lieutenant, that effective immediately, humanity is granted Level 2 membership status in the Galactic Council. And additionally, the Administrator turned to address the gathered officials. The zero-gravity obstacle course will be immediately redesigned. Clearly, we have been testing the wrong qualities all this time. James couldn't help it. He laughed. You might want to add a rule about not going backward through it either. The room went suddenly, completely silent. Ambassador Krelthax drifted closer. What did you say? Just that if you're redesigning the course, you might want to prevent people from going through it backward. The vortex would actually be easier that way since you could use the rotation to... Are you suggesting, Krelthax interrupted, mandibles quivering, that a human could complete the course in reverse? James hadn't meant it seriously, but looking at the absolute horror on the alien faces around him, those that had recognizable faces anyway, he couldn't resist. Oh, absolutely. In fact, it would probably be easier. The needle thread would be a piece of cake from the other direction. And the gravity wells? Child's play in reverse. The High Administrator's glowing eyes dimmed momentarily, apparently the alien equivalent of a stunned blink. This is unprecedented. James shrugged, enjoying the moment perhaps a bit too much. That's humans for you. We specialize in the unprecedented. 6 hours later, bandaged and bruised but still grinning, James sat in Ambassador Krelthax's office sipping something that was allegedly tea but tasted more like liquefied starlight. The footage has gone viral across 17 systems, the ambassador reported, mandibles clicking in what James now recognized as suppressed amazement. The betting pools alone crashed 3 major financial networks. No one placed credits on a human success. Not even you? James asked, raising an eyebrow. I may have placed a small wager against you, Krelthax admitted, though in my defense I've lost the equivalent of your planet's annual GDP. James choked on his not tea. Seriously? No, Lieutenant. That was what humans call a joke. I am attempting to understand your species' unusual fixation with humorous falsehoods. The ambassador's skin rippled with blue bioluminescence. Though I did lose a considerable sum. James leaned back, wincing as his battered body protested. So what happens now? Does humanity get a fancy certificate or something? The formal integration protocols have already begun. By tomorrow, human representatives will be seated on 7 major council committees. Your species' unique perspective is considered highly valuable. Our perspective? Indeed. Krelthax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. For millennia, the Galactic Council has valued conformity and adherence to established norms. Your approach to the obstacle course has caused quite a philosophical crisis among the elder species. Because I went around an obstacle instead of through it? Because you questioned the fundamental nature of the challenge itself. The ambassador's eyes focused intently on James. Most species, when faced with a seemingly impossible task, either accept defeat or attempt to improve their capabilities within the established parameters. Humans alone asked, what if the parameters themselves are flawed? James shrugged. That's just how we think. And that, Lieutenant Harper, is why humanity has been granted Level 2 status despite being centuries behind most member species technologically. The Council believes your species possesses something far more valuable than advanced technology. And what's that? Krelthax's skin glowed with a new pattern, one James hadn't seen before. The ability to make us question our assumptions. In a civilization as ancient as ours, that is a precious gift indeed. The ambassador rose, signaling the end of their meeting. Rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow humanity takes its place among the stars, far sooner than anyone expected. As James headed back to his quarters, his AI assistant broke the silence. Lieutenant, I've received 17 formal requests from various species, asking if you would demonstrate the backward attempt. James laughed, then immediately regretted it as his ribs protested. Tell them I'll need at least a week to recover. And Ellis? Yes, Lieutenant. Send the course schematics to Earth. Tell them to start training the next liaison using everything we've learned. If we're going to be part of this council, we might as well show them all the ways humans can break their toys. Very good, sir. And may I add a personal observation? Go ahead. Humanity, fuck yeah! James nearly collapsed with laughter despite the pain. Ellis, did you just curse? I believe it was contextually appropriate, sir. Based on my analysis of your vital signs throughout the course, you were thinking it the entire time. James couldn't argue with that. As he floated through the corridors of the Galactic Council headquarters, he caught various alien diplomats staring at him. Some with what appeared to be respect, others with what was definitely fear. Good, he thought. A little fear was healthy. Because if there was one thing humans had proven throughout their history, it was this. Tell them something is impossible, and they'll not only try to do it anyway, they'll find a dozen different ways to prove you wrong. And sometimes, just to show off, they'll do it backward. End.